everyone. Welcome to a session on the Dove, focusing on responsible tourism and sustainability. This session will be with Surya Ramachandran, a naturalist, author, and now a lodge owner. He has many interesting insights and ideas to share. The Dove is an online travel magazine with its heart in the right place, advocating restoration, regeneration, and sustainability as business choices for tourism and hospitality. We drive this through a series of interviews and articles and campaigns. A dedicated space on our website, thedove.news, will take you to some of the exclusives that we bring to you. Today we have with us young Surya Ramachandran. It's 10 years since I've been calling him young. A naturalist who began exploring the jungles of India, the Indian forests, at a very young age. And that became the essence of what he does in life today. Sitting somewhere in the forests of the Western Ghats, Surya wears many hats, caps. He was actually trying to wear a cap just now. He is a wonderfully articulate naturalist, a great storyteller. He's also one of the youngest lodge owners I know, and he's also an author. Great pleasure to introduce to you Surya Ramachandran. Hi, Surya.
Hi, Shobha. Thank you so much, Shobha. Thank you for the lovely introduction.
Let's begin. You're an engineer, right? So how and when did you discover your passion for the Indian jungles?
Well, Shobha, I'd like to start by saying I'm not an engineer. I'm academically qualified as an engineer, and that's what I did in 4 years of college. But that was one of those pure things, one of those academia kind of things which happen a lot in South India, right? When you generally do good in school, you get a good scholarship in college. And I was into sport also, so I got a very good scholarship in college. So it seemed like the natural turn of things. And when I was 17, I knew I was interested in wildlife. I always was from the age of 5 or 6. I used to go to zoos initially and then to national parks with my mom. And then with the nature club in school, I used to go out. But there was nothing really concrete over there, right? I just thought it was an interest, and neither did I have the exposure to know that there is something that can be done which is more long-term and more concrete with this interest. So I just went with the flow, finished my engineering when I was 21. But to be honest, the 4 years of doing engineering in college kind of made it clear to me that I need to find something else to do. And the first thing that popped up was wildlife. I actually spent a little bit of time in Chennai with a television, with a news channel. It was called Puriya Talaimurai, which is a Tamil news channel. And what they interestingly wanted to do was wildlife documentaries in the local dialect. So they wanted to do wildlife documentaries in Tamil. And that sounded exciting, and we did that for a while. But then, of course, the TRP issues and all came about, and they changed their model. And that is the time when I moved to Central India, and you know the story, how I went to Forsyth as a guest, and then I applied for an internship with my then boss, who's now my partner and one of my very good friends. And and I've never turned back after that.
Let's look at it from a point of view as a naturalist. How did your entire narrative, which is very special to you, how did that take place?
Well, to be honest, till I was 20 years old, I had no idea that there was someone called a naturalist who actually can be like an ambassador to a wilderness area for a novice or any visitor who's coming in. And when I was 20, I was lucky enough to go with my family to South Africa for a week of safari. I had an uncle who was very keen wildlife photographer, and he took me, and that changed me because I had a very interesting host over there. His name was Cleo, and he was my guide. He was our host. He used to make me my coffee in the morning on safari. He used to have a drink with us in the evening, and he was the reason our trip was what it was. It was a very interesting experience for me because he was not a scientist. He was not a researcher. He was not anything to do with the forest department or the wildlife department. He was just working for this lodge and taking care of us and showing us the most amazing wildlife and giving us the most beautiful stories every time he sees something. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. I wish there was something like this in India. And that is kind of how I fell in love with Forsyth, because that's the place where I met my first naturalists in India. Because before that, all my travels were to parks with mum, and there used to be a forest guard or there used to be a local patrol team who used to take me along. But there was no one really telling me what. So when I went to Forsyth, I was a total zero. I had no idea what I was getting into. All I knew was I wanted to do this, and I was given a room outside the lodge, and I had to walk through the forest. And in initial years, I still remember running through it at night because I was so scared of something that had come my way. But what is interesting about Forsyth was, I'm glad I started there, because it is one of the best places for any naturalist to start, even today, simply because of what Forsyth stands for and what the park Satpura stands for. It is one of those interesting places where the park and the lodge are run in sustainable ways. That is a very rare, beautiful combination. Because in other parks, there are lodges which are trying to be sustainable, but the park operates in a different model, sometimes, not everywhere. But Satpura and Forsyth is this beautiful, it is a lovely marriage of two interesting ideas, thanks to the like-minded people in the lodge and the forest department. So when I went there, I was suddenly able to walk around. I was able to get on a boat and canoe. I was able to work with everyone who's local. And luckily I learned some Hindi in school that's helped me survive, because everyone over there was a local, including the park guides. The canoe guides were ex-fishermen who were trained to show birds on the canoes. The boatmen were fishermen. The park guides were all taken from each village after a rigorous training program which Hashim actually conducted for them over a period of 3 months. And except for me, David and Varun, because we were the only ones from outside, and Rishi, of course, the manager, everyone else was from that area. And this is something that was new to me. And I thought it was a norm till I visited other places and realized, no, this is actually something special. And that is kind of the first thing that hit me about Forsyth, because they were providing a very high quality wilderness experience and a hospitality experience with no professionally trained staff, including us. I should say that. I mean, I'm an engineer. David is an English literature graduate. Varun is a banker. I think Rishi was into marketing of oncology medication or something. So no one was professional, but everyone had the heart in the right place, and we were all given the freedom to work with the forest department and the locals to create a beautiful experience. And I think that's why I kind of stuck around at Forsyth for 4.5 to 5 years. Yeah.
Fantastic. And a great period of learning, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
And so let's talk about then your inspiration to create a book, to co-author a book. So I guess the roots for that also was your years in Satpura?
Absolutely, Shobha. Absolutely. I don't think there was any other way I would put it. Because Satpura is one park in central India which is not focused on tigers. Every other park in central India is focused on tigers. So thanks to David being who he is, and he was always a person who wanted to know everything about every little thing in the forest, and we all followed suit. And suddenly we realized we had so much of information bank, not just on Satpura. We had by then traveled to different parts of central India, and we came across this beautiful book from South Africa, written by Duncan Burchard, which is called the Photographic Guide to the Wildlife of South Africa. It was just this simple, beautiful book, which if you look at it, you want to see all those nice things. And that's all it was. And we thought, why not do something like this for Central India? Because we were carrying a mammal book, a bird book, a butterfly book, a dragonfly book, and a reptile book in our backpacks every time we went for a walk. And we thought, why not have something something simple and concise, which may just trigger the interest of someone who's visiting the forest. And that is kind of how the idea was formed. And we didn't expect it to go anywhere, but we just sat over it in the monsoon times, after safaris, between things. And eventually it took shape. And I think one of the best things we did, or we had the funds to do, thanks to people who helped us publish the book, was that we were able to give it free of cost to all the guides in all the parks in central India. So what that did was, suddenly these guides were showing tigers on the front page. And then every time they couldn't find anything, they were forced to show other stuff which they could point out in the book. And that kind of, I feel to an extent, had some kind of an effect on the people. We are trying to get it converted to Hindi, where it has a bigger effect on the people. But that's a process which we have to wait till the post-COVID era. Yeah.
Fabulous. And then, I also know that, the book actually opened up a lot more avenues for you, right? As an author, you're in the process of coming up with the second edition, which is
Yeah,
like,
I mean, it's a different book entirely. We've already finished 3 editions of our Central India book, thanks to the elephants which walked in from Jharkhand. We didn't have elephants in our book. Suddenly there are elephants in Bandhavgarh. But we are now working on a South India book, which is almost done. We are just waiting for all this lockdown and things to finish, because we need the printers and the publishers, everyone, to start working again. So that's going to be a very intense thing on South India, because again, a place with rainforest, a beautiful coastline, the Deccan Plateau, the southeastern plains of Tamil Nadu, the Eastern Ghats. It sounds very daunting even for us after traveling through these parts for so long. So we thought, why not simplify it with one book which people can carry, whether they're interested in hiking or just birding or whatever it may be. Maybe if they have a pocket-sized book which they can carry in their backpacks, maybe that'll simplify things, to the best of our ability. So we thought we were going to have 1,400 species, but we ended up having 1,950 species in the book, and I feel it might touch 2,000. But yes, we're almost done with that, and that's going to be exciting. And we're trying to make it into a series. We're doing Western India, which is Rajasthan and Gujarat. We are trying to do Ladakh. So just using this time to do as much as we can to simplify.
it's also, I mean, I've been in this conservation tourism marketing business for a long time. I've also seen the mindset of people have slowly changed to what it is today. Not as fast as we would like to, but one of the things that we are focusing on, even as the DOPE, or even as Responsible Tourism Society of India, is to bring mindset change in the travelers, because they have to understand the importance of conserving and preservation. So that it begins there, right? Because typically, what we do in lodges and things like that, in the name of luxury or experience or something like that, we fall in with what the client requires or what the traveler wants to do. However, like you have pointed out, and I've seen this happen with Foresight, is what you set out became the norm, and people fell in with that idea. Right?
Absolutely.
So,
But you have to remember, Shobha, I mean, all of us were together on this, but it definitely did take a long time for it, because of our ideals. It was not a great business choice, but it paid dividends
in the long
later.
run.
But we in the long run, absolutely.
Yes, absolutely.
And in a fantastic way, yes.
And not only that, it also encouraged other lodge owners to follow a similar path and a similar narrative. Yeah. So let's look at you from the lens of a lodge owner. Let's talk about that journey and how did that happen, and then we'll talk about you talk about the landscape, and then we'll get a little bit more deeper into it.
Absolutely. I wanted to be in a place where I can guide to my best abilities without having restrictions, and create an experience which I would like to create for myself. It's something like that. So when I was in Kanha for 2 years, I got a call and from Hashim, who was my boss initially, and he asked me to join him in setting up a community reserve in Ladakh, which is pretty much what the initial conversation was, based on snow leopards outside the auspices of protected areas, that is government protected areas. He said, there is wildlife everywhere. Why should we depend on national parks to create tourism? Why not we go work with the locals directly? And Ladakh seemed to be the perfect place for this, simply because the population density is so less. People have wildlife in their backyards. There are people who know how to find wildlife, and there is this total absolute beauty about the place that people just can't ignore. So it had the perfect mix. All it needed was the channeling of a thought process, which is already being done in Ladakh by the Snow Leopard Conservancy. So we just teamed up with them and focused on 1 or 2 villages in the Sham area, which is traditionally the trading area of Ladakh, where this is in central Ladakh. And we found a couple of chaps who were fantastic and willing to work with us. And that is kind of the journey which started about 4 years ago now. And now it's 4 years old, 4 to 5 years old. I joined about 4 years ago. And we have been able to create a wilderness product in a non-wilderness area or a non-protected area, just with the support of the local people and their knowledge. And that is, I think, what the future of wilderness tourism anywhere in the world should be. It should be able to harness the local knowledge and absolutely give it to them entirely. It's not just harnessing the local knowledge and passing it on for outsiders to come and run the show. They should be able to run the show. They should be empowered with the ability to run a hospitality setup as well as talk, guide, and track wildlife, and which is all fantastic in Ladakh. And it comes naturally to them, as you've seen, Shobha. They do it really well. But what it also did was suddenly we had this huge conglomerate of villages working with us and the Snow Leopard Conservancy and forming a network of areas which wanted to conserve wildlife in their backyard because, to simply put it, they realized there is more money in an animal being alive than in an animal being dead. And that is kind of what we need to harness.
So, going on the principle for sustainability and responsible tourism, that the final beneficiary of any tourism or hospitality project is supposed to be the local people, right? The host community. And that the final beneficiary of this tourism initiative cannot exclude the integrity of a destination, right?
Absolutely.
With these two in place, the Snow Leopard Lodge, the whole idea of Snow Leopard Lodge, which you are now trying to spread it to a couple of other places. It is like one of the, I think it is a very, it's an ideal, it's an ideal scenario, right? But have you got it into a kind of a blueprint that can be copied by others? I mean, what are there still challenges? Have you all perfected it in terms of in terms of creating profitability for you and in terms of creating profits and incomes for the local community?
Well, yes. So before I talk about how it is easily blueprintable and replicated by others anywhere, that is definitely the idea with which we started, so that more and more non-protected areas, especially in Ladakh, people can follow suit based on what they've seen happening to us, and happening not to us, but more to the villagers and the communities where we are operating in. But having said that, it is not that easily copyable because the people are different in every place. The mentalities are different. The thought processes are different. Everything is different. I mean, it requires a lot of work to instill that thought process of conservation, number one, tourism, number two, into a community and get them wholeheartedly supporting it. Because if we don't have those two instilled and they're not with you all the way through the ups and downs, because you are going to have ups and downs at the start, then it's very easy for things to fall apart, because they will just go back to their lifestyles because they're all very self-sustainable people. So we had a very smooth run in Central Ladakh, to be honest, but we had a lot of difficulties replicating the same ideas in Western Ladakh, where we try to work with brown bears. You visited the place, and there the community and the thought process, everything was so different, and our way of operating and our thought process and our conversations, for some reason, did not work over there as smoothly as it did in Central Ladakh. So maybe if someone else takes it up there with at least our financial methodology, maybe they will succeed. So that is kind of what I want to say. I'm not sure whether I've been very clear. All I wanted to say is that yes, it is a model which can be replicated in multiple places. It is a model which is the only model for conservation tourism which can be successful in creating more protected areas out of non-protected areas. But having said that, it is not going to be easy for anyone to do it anywhere, and it requires a lot of groundwork.
Would you say, having done this for such a long time, 4 years, 5 years in Forsyth, and about 4.5 years with Snow Leopard Lodge, would you believe that you've been able to bring about change in traveler mindset? That's what I was trying to get at.
Yeah, I'm not sure about it, to be honest. Definitely on an individual basis, yes, but maybe not on the scale that we wanted to. Simply because at Snow Leopard Lodge, at least, I would definitely say people were still coming for the snow leopard. So I'm not even sure there is a mindset change. I mean, they're coming to us surely because there are snow leopards being seen. And then once they come in, they see people like Stanzen, Nordbu, Morup, and all these guys running the show. There's no one else who has been in hospitality anywhere else before who's running the show. So the mindset change may happen once they come, and they're all now talking to Stanzen and all these guys over the phone and discussing with them and making plans with them and constantly in touch with them. So yes, there is a huge mindset change both amongst the locals who are running the lodge and the people who are coming in once they come in. But I'm not really sure they come seeking this at the start. At least that is my understanding of Snow Leopard Lodge.
No, but let's look back at the Satpura model. I think in Satpura, and looking at how tourism is behaving now, I think you know, even after y'all had left Satpura, and I think it did manage to create a difference in the way travelers started to look at Satpura, in the way in the kind of in the kind of aspirations that they had for Satpura. Not only the travelers who came there, I think even the lodge owners kind of changed their narratives where Satpura was concerned. That's what I was getting to.
Yeah, absolutely. I think definitely what you're saying is absolutely true. Maybe I'm just being extremely finicky in that I want things to happen faster in a larger scale. I mean, that's what we were all striving for. But yes, there is an organic change in thought process that's happening, not just amongst the travelers and lodge owners, but in terms of acceptance of Satpura as a destination by FTOs and travel agents alike. Now, if I tell this to someone 10 years ago, they probably all of them would have laughed at us, saying Satpura is necessary for any Central Indian wildlife itinerary. But today it is irreplaceable as a destination because it makes a beautiful start for someone who wants to just understand the wilderness, and it makes a beautiful, quiet, peaceful finish after someone who's done a week of chasing tigers, for example. So yes, it is having that change, but I would want it. I'm just worried, to be honest, Shobha, that Satpura may fall into the trap of trying to be mainstream. So it hasn't happened as yet, and I just hope it doesn't.
Yeah, but that's where self-regulation comes in, which is something which is lacking in the Indian travel and hospitality industry, where people would like to check. I mean, would want to see what is it that they're going to do in a new landscape, and which is what is very special about the Snow Leopard Lodge that you do. You typically try, and if there is a crowd, you typically start to look at other areas, right? That's the whole idea.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we could have we were all discussing. We could have easily made more rooms in Ule, but we wanted that to stop. And Ule is, I think, good enough, and it's about the right size. And that's when another village. And what is the beauty of how we moved to Mangyu was that the people in Mangyu saw what we were doing, and they kind of said, "We also have wildlife. Why don't you come join us?" And I think that was beautiful. I think that is basically the thought process change which I have seen amongst the locals, in terms of they realize that wilderness tourism is sustainable way of holding on to their lifestyles and creating a beautiful environment for people to come and stay with them. So yes, so we have seen that change, but I'm just being a realist, and maybe I'm being a pessimist in saying, yes, I'd like to see it more, and I'd like to see it happening faster.
So would you say that if tourism gets better, or the potential for tourism gets higher in these areas, do you think there is the threat of people trying to leave their traditional lifestyles, I mean, or their farming or anything else, or anything else that they do, to try and start adopting like the homestay or the like a hospitality project?
Okay, so interestingly, I can only talk confidently on Ladakh, maybe not on other spaces. Yeah. Ladakh, interestingly, everything that they do in terms of farming or building a house is a social activity till date, where everyone from the village gets together, works on one person's farm, or they build one person's house, or they celebrate one person's some event in their house. So it is extremely frowned upon if someone is not participating in one of those social activities. So despite the tourism being a mainframe, there is still a lot of their important things which we as Snow Leopard Lodge try not to interfere with. In fact, we even shut the lodge during those important days, and we block the dates at the start of the year where they say these are the dates where we need to be doing this and this and this, and we respect that even if it comes in the heart of Snow Leopard season. And one interesting thing that happened, which actually happened, was that the Snow Leopards, when we came about, were taking a lot of livestock in the Ule Sham area, basically. What was fantastic was earlier they used to poison the animals. I'm talking about many years back before the Snow Leopard Conservancy came over. But once we came in, they started calling us because they knew that we will compensate them for the loss of their livestock, and the people could see a snow leopard at close quarters. But after a point, we realized that they didn't mind their yaks and cows being taken by snow leopards because they were being compensated for it. So suddenly we realized what we were doing, though it was great for the animals and the people, it may not be sustainable in the way that it's changing people's mindsets. So we actually got together with the Snow Leopard Conservancy and implemented the covering of the cattle corrals because they were all open from the top. That's why the snow leopards and the wolves could get in and take the livestock. So once we made sure we got the covers set up on all these cattle sheds, what happened was the snow leopards resorted back to wild prey. And I think that is the point where I personally felt we were doing something absolutely right. Because till then, it all felt great. We were seeing snow leopards, the locals were making money, they were happy, we were happy, everyone was happy. But now their livestock is also safe. And when I say livestock is safe, for someone who's listening to this sitting in a city, it may not mean much. But for someone in Ladakh in the mountains, their wealth and their fortune is the amount of cattle and yaks and zoos that they own. And it means a lot to them. So securing that means securing their way of life and still going ahead with the way we are operating or the conservation tourism model that we are trying to bring in. So I think that kind of was the point where I realized, yes, right now we are fine. Definitely not perfect.
As travelers, as informed travelers who are keen on doing the right thing where sustainability is concerned, they choose and then they create demand for products such as yours. Don't you think that might change the landscape? And what are those? I mean, what is the 5-7 things that you think every traveler should think about when he is trying to look at being a green traveler or trying to choose a community-based lodging?
Yeah, Shubha, basically, whatever you said, absolutely agree. The traveler can definitely change the way a lodge thinks of success. If a traveler chooses to go for sustainable, eco-friendly, well thought out properties, then yes, for sure. But I feel the forces which are pulling on either side, at least with your I don't know what you call them, these mass marketing websites where you can go and book based on price, and they have these simple categories of what you need. And there are surprisingly even wildlife lodges which can be booked, like let's say like by a Make My Trip or a booking.com or whatever it is. I feel the forces pulling on either side are unbalanced right now. Definitely there is a huge number of informed travelers in our country who are doing a great job and giving feedback and traveling to the right places. But there is also a much larger section which is choosing to ignore that. Yes, education for sure is the way forward. People need to be educated on why they are traveling to a place, on how they need to travel to a place. But having said that, we are a long way from making that a mainstream thing. And coming to the second part of your question, the 5 to 7 things I would say a person should look at when they're traveling to a place is, these are questions that I would ask myself when I'm traveling to a place. Why am I going there? Firstly, I mean, why am I going there to have a good time, drink with my friends? Am I going there to actually get an experience? Am I going there to see the wilderness and be informed or learn a lot from this holiday? Then yes, then I would look at the destinations what are the different properties that the destination provides. I mean, the first thing I would look at personally is the guides. I would like to see what are the feedbacks the guides have got from different places. I'll try to make a few calls and find out, because I feel a lodge which cares enough to get a great naturalist will have done something right in other places also, because there are park guides and most of the places feel they can do without guides. But when you have good guides in a lodge, that means the story that they're trying to say is right from one end to the other. So definitely the guide I choose or the naturalist I choose is my first criteria, and then I will look at the lodge and the sustainability of the lodge for sure. I generally prefer smaller properties which are run by a couple or a family with a few rooms with good ground, so that even when I'm not in the park or even if I'm not out doing an activity, I can still choose to walk around and still see exciting stuff. So I think the grounds of a lodge make a huge difference for me. I don't like manicured gardens and lawns. I like it to be wild. I like it to blend in with everything that that it has around it. And definitely a good host and a naturalist to weave a good story, whether we're having dinner or whether we're out doing an activity. I think these are the things I'll keep in mind when I'm going out to any place. Let it even be a city or whatever it is.
Fantastic. Thank you, Surya. That was a great insight into community-based tourism, and also how travelers can be responsible when they are traveling to wildlife areas or any place for that matter. What is it that they should be looking at? Thank you for your time, and we look forward to seeing you again. Thank you.
Thank you, Shobha.